He was the man every man wanted to be. Whiskey in one hand, a rifle in the other, women at his feet. But behind closed doors, Hemingway was drowning in a silence no one dared to name. What happens when the strongest man you know loses the one thing that made him feel like a man? This isn't a story about fame. It's about fear aging and the words he never wrote. But maybe you've thought yourself, there's a myth we build around certain men that they were invincible, unshakable, that they woke up every morning with a fire in their belly and a woman in their bed no matter how old they got. Hemingway was one of those men, rugged, adventurous, sharp with a gun, sharper with a sentence. But what if the man behind the legend was tired? What if he was afraid? What if in the final years he sat in a quiet room, looked at his trembling hands and wondered if he was still a man? This is not a story about Hemingway the icon. This is about the silence he carried and the words he never wrote, about shame, about impotence, about the terrifying truth that even lions grow old and no one tells them how to lay down gently. And maybe, just maybe, it's also about us, the men who keep quiet, about what's slipping, about what no longer works like it used to. So tonight, let me tell you the story of a man who could write about anything except his own unraveling. He kept a shotgun by the door. That's the detail most people remember about Hemingway near the end. The man who once boxed in Paris basements and hunted lions in Kenya now shuffled around his Idaho home with pills in one pocket and despair in the other. But no one talks about the way he stared at that shotgun, not with rage, not with wild madness, but with something quieter, something like shame, something like surrender. You wouldn't know it from the novels. Hemingway wrote with hard lines, clipped masculinity. His men drank, fought, made love in the shadows, and never once asked for help. But the real man behind the myth, he was already drowning in silence long before the world realized. There are diaries, buried letters, and the confessions of a few friends who got close enough to see the cracks. By the time he was in his late 50s, Hemingway had suffered a series of head injuries, lost his confidence as a writer, and quietly, something even he wouldn't put into words, he began to feel his manhood slipping away. No one talks about that part. They don't tell you about the nights he couldn't perform, or the mornings he couldn't look at himself in the mirror. They don't talk about the way his hands would tremble when he tried to light a cigarette, or the way his third wife stopped asking for him at night. And if she noticed the distance, the cold shoulder, the edge of bitterness in his voice, she never mentioned it out loud. Because he didn't either. This is the silence that swallows men alive, the silence around aging, around virility, around sex, when the body no longer obeys like it once did. And it's not just Hemingway's story, it's mine. Maybe it's yours too. I remember the first time something didn't work. I was 53, nothing catastrophic, just a moment, a hesitation in the body, a misfire in a machine I thought I had mastered. I laughed it off. She smiled politely. We both pretended it was nothing. But something had shifted, and once you notice the shift, you never stop feeling it. In your spine, in your chest, in the way you avoid the mirror, in the way you start measuring your worth, not in love but in loss of stamina, desire, certainty. The performance begins to crack, but you keep pretending you're still the man from 10 years ago. That's what Hemingway did. He drank more, he wrote less, he hunted harder. He became a louder version of the man he used to be, hoping the noise would drown out the quiet terror creeping into his bones. But silence is patient. It waits. And when it comes, when it wraps around your shoulders in the dark, you either speak or you disappear. Hemingway disappeared slowly. He became erratic, paranoid. He told friends he was being watched by the FBI, that his home was bugged. They called it madness. Maybe it was. But maybe it was also grief, the kind that has no language. The kind men are never taught to name. What happens when you can no longer be the man the world expected you to be? What happens when you start to wonder if being a man was ever really yours to define? They say he wrote drafts he never finished in those final months. Some of the pages were found rambling, incoherent, painful. He mentioned pain in his legs, confusion in his thoughts. But nowhere did he write about the one thing that likely haunted him the most. The sense that his body had betrayed him, that his desire had dulled, that he was no longer wanted, not by women, not by publishers, not even by himself. And so he said nothing, because men like him, men like us, don't say such things, do we? We suffer in coded language. I'm just tired. Too much on my mind. Work's been rough. We joke it away, drink it down, push through. But what if Hemingway hadn't pushed through? What if he'd sat down, opened his mouth, and let the truth out, not in fiction, but in flesh? What if he'd said, I'm scared. I can't feel anything. I can't get hard. I don't know who I am without that part of me. What if we could say those words? Would the silence crack just enough to let in some light? There's something cruel about the way a man's decline is never spoken of, only whispered about behind doors and inside his own head. When women age, society shames them for losing youth. But when men age, the shame is more invisible. It comes quietly. You don't get a warning when your energy dips, or when your wife starts reaching for the blanket instead of you. There's no ceremony when you begin skipping your morning jogs, or when you start brushing off sex with a joke instead of a kiss. And no one tells you how much of your identity was tied to your ability to perform at work, at home, in bed. Hemingway built an entire persona around performance. He was the ultimate masculine ideal gun in hand whiskey. On the table, a woman on each arm. But inside the truth was unraveling. In his 50s, the accidents piled up, a plane crash in Africa that left him concussed and in pain, chronic headaches, memory loss. His body began to betray him, slowly, numb fingers, mood swings, insomnia. He once joked to a friend that his body was trying to shut the whole damn operation down. But behind the sarcasm, something darker was creeping in. Sex wasn't easy anymore. He didn't write about it. But the people who knew him, his biographers, lovers, friends, they hinted at it. There were long stretches where he was reclusive. There were letters never sent, diaries with missing pages, entire chapters abandoned halfway through. And then there was the drinking, not the romantic kind, the kind that numbs, that dulls memory, that quiets the internal voice saying, you're not a man anymore, not the way you used to be. That voice is the one no one warns you about. I heard that voice too, not at once. It came slowly, like a drop of water falling in the same place every day, until it carves a hole in the stone. It began the day I canceled a weekend trip with my wife, not because I was busy, but because I didn't want to face the bedroom. It continued when I caught her looking at me in the mirror and quickly looking away. Not in disgust, but in distance. Something was leaving me. I couldn't name it at first. Then I realized it was certainty. The quiet, unspoken confidence that I could still be wanted, desired, that I could still want myself. I didn't tell anyone, not even her, because what was I supposed to say? Hey, I think I'm losing that part of myself that used to feel like power. Hey, it's been months and I can't bring myself to initiate. Hey, I'm scared that if I try, I'll fail. And if I fail, I'll lose the last thread of who I used to be. And so I stayed silent, just like he did. Men don't write about impotence. They don't write about declining libido or the shame that coils in the gut. When your partner reaches for you and you panic not out of disinterest, but out of fear, you can't follow through. It's not just physical, it's identity. We confuse sex with worth. And when that part falters, we think we do. But what Hemingway's silence teaches us, if we dare to listen, is that silence is not strength. Silence is surrender. He could have written it. And if he had, maybe some of us wouldn't feel so alone now. He could have written about the moment a woman touched him, and he froze. About the way the light changed in her eyes. About the way he made excuses and poured another drink. About the way he stood in front of the mirror afterward, shoulders slumped as if mourning someone who had just died. He could have told us what it means to grieve a part of yourself no one else knows you lost, but he didn't. And so we have to, because the shame we carry is generational, passed down like a silent heirloom from father to son. Don't cry, don't speak, don't show weakness, be a man. But what if being a man meant saying I am still a man even when I'm vulnerable? What if desire wasn't just about hardness but honesty? What if being enough wasn't tied to how often or how well, but simply to how true you're willing to be? There's a kind of grief men don't talk about, not the grief of losing a parent or a job or even a marriage. No, this grief is quieter. It's the ache of losing access to a part of ourselves that once felt effortless desire, the ability to express it, to act on it, to be wanted, to want, and yet no one brings casseroles or sympathy when this part of you fades. There's no funeral for it. You're expected to just adjust, move on, laugh it off, keep pretending. But the pretending gets heavy. Hemingway pretended until the weight became unbearable. He crafted characters who could endure anything: war, rejection, betrayal, even loss. But not impotence, not softness, not longing without resolution. His men bled from the chest, not the heart. He never wrote about the night when your wife turns to you gently and says it's okay, even though you know it's not. He never wrote about the panic of failure, not in battle, but in bed. He never wrote about how a man can become a stranger to his own body. But maybe he didn't have the words, or maybe he was too ashamed to find them. He wasn't alone. Even now, so many of us walk around with that same silence in our chest. We joke about low T, about needing the little blue pill, but beneath the punchlines is fear. Fear that we're losing something we can't get back. Fear that if we speak it aloud, the illusion of strength will vanish. I remember sitting at the edge of the bed one morning, my hands resting on my thighs, staring at the floor. My wife was in the shower. She was humming something. And I felt this strange mix of love and shame, because I wanted her, but I couldn't act on it. My body had stopped cooperating, and my pride had stopped letting me admit it. So I stayed silent. And I think of Hemingway in those final years, when the words had dried up and the world had grown quiet, and the only sound was the echo of who he used to be. I think of him sitting at his desk staring at a blank page, not because he had nothing to say, but because the one truth he couldn't write was about himself. The bullet that ended his life wasn't the first shot. The first shot was the silence. That first moment when he lost something vital, something deeply male, and didn't feel safe enough to say, "This hurts." He wasn't weak, he was human. Just like us, we spend so much time trying to preserve the image of who we were that we miss the chance to embrace who we're becoming. A man's worth is not measured by his erections, his endurance, or how many times a week he initiates. But we've been wired to believe otherwise. We've been sold a myth that strength equals action, power equals control. and sex equals identity. But what if intimacy starts not with performance but with truth? What if the new strength is showing up even when we're uncertain, even when things don't work, even when the body falters? What if love isn't about friction but about presence? I've started speaking to my wife more. Not in declarations, just small things. I feel different these days. Some nights I'm not sure what I need. I miss the way we used to reach for each other. And she listens. Not with pity, but with softness, because maybe that's the part no one tells you. When you stop hiding, someone might meet you in the open. Not all men are as lucky. Hemingway didn't get there. He ran out of time. But we don't have to. You don't need to fix it all. You don't need to get back what was lost. You just need to stop pretending. That's where healing begins. That's where the silence starts to loosen. And maybe that's where a new kind of man can begin to emerge. Not the one who conquers, but the one who confesses. Not the one who hides, but the one who speaks. Not the one who performs, but the one who feels. So if you're listening to this right now and something inside you feels seen, if you've been holding that silence in your chest about your body, your desire, your fear of losing the man you once were, please know this: you're not broken. You're not weak. You're not alone. You are still a man. Not because everything works the way it used to, but because you have the courage to face what's changing without running from it. Even Hemingway, with all his words, couldn't say these things out loud. But maybe we can, quietly, gently, in the dark, if that's what it takes. And if this story touched you, if it echoed something you've never been able to say, leave a comment, share your thoughts. You don't have to write much, just enough to remind another man out there that he's not carrying it alone. And if you want more stories like this, soft truths for men who are still becoming, please subscribe to this channel. There's more to come, more confessions, more quiet strength, more of what no one taught us, but what we still need to hear. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. You're still here, and that matters more than you know.